It all started one rainy April afternoon. I was playing video games with my brother. We shared a gaming console we had gotten for Christmas the year before. We were playing a popular fighting game, the original of what would become a long-running series, and as usual, Matthew was kicking my ass with his favourite character, one which had been his one and only choice ever since we first played it. Over time, I began to get frustrated with him, or more so, my lack of ability to beat him. He had beaten me every single time, and at this point, my frustration had reached a boiling point. I got so angry that I unplugged and threw my controller directly at his face, smashing his left eye. I froze as he cried out in pain, tears and blood gushing from his face, like an asymmetrical water fountain that flowed clear on one side and red on the other. Our mother ran in to see what the problem was and let out a loud shriek when she saw Matthew's bloodied face. She yelled at me and slapped me hard in the face, knocking me to the floor. I watched, tears falling from my eyes now, as she picked him up and rushed him out the door, putting him in the back seat of the car, and proceeded to speed away to the hospital. My father sent me to my room, smacking me on the back of the head as I ran off. I laid in bed, crying, waiting for them to come home, until the phone rang. My father answered, and after a little while, I heard him begin to sob. I went to see what was wrong, and he was just sitting on the floor, the phone dangling from its cord on the wall. His face was buried into his hands as he wailed so loud that it shook my bones. My mother had been in such a panic to get Matthew to the hospital before he lost his eye that she ended up causing a horrible car accident that killed Matthew instantly. The many people from the other cars involved in the wreck lost their lives as well. My mother suffered from many broken bones and a concussion, but managed to survive. It was all my fault. If I had not thrown that controller, if I had not reacted like a whiny, spoiled brat, Matthew never would have gotten hurt. Our mother never would have panicked, never would have wrecked the car, and Matthew would still be alive. Mother never would have been sentenced to prison for the deaths of those innocent souls. My father would not have sent me away to live with my mother's sister because he couldn't stomach to look at me anymore. Years passed, and I became a pariah in my family. Nobody wanted anything to do with me, and my aunt barely tolerated me. That didn't stop me from living my life, however. I continued to go to school, even got a scholarship to a prestigious college. My interest in video games, however, died with my brother. In my mid-20s, the company I worked for gave away incentives to their employees during the holiday season for perfect attendance, good performances, etc. My name was entered into a raffle to receive a mystery prize, and, to my surprise, I won the latest popular video game console. It instantly reminded me of Matthew, and at first I wanted nothing to do with it, but I took it anyway. By this point, I was married and had a son, so I decided I would give it to him as a Christmas present. No point in wasting such an expensive piece of technology, right? My son loved his video game console and even convinced me to play with him. Eventually, my enjoyment of gaming came back, and I decided it was time to move on from the past and enjoy the future with my son. We played together so much, it became a major bonding tool for us. Eventually, I bought a console for myself and set it up in my bedroom for some late-night gaming while he and my wife slept. I began to play it for a couple of hours every night and eventually discovered online gaming. I created an account and found a game that I, at first, hesitated when I first saw it. It was the latest installment of the video game that Matthew and I played as children. I decided to buy it and play online. As expected, I was no good at first. Many other players were significantly better than I was. After a while, however, I began to improve my skills and became a decent player. One day, I got a friend request from an online stranger. The Gamertag was Bromat0493. I stared for a moment. Sure, it could have been some guy named Matt, but it was the 0493 that froze me. Matthew died in April 1993, so this was just bizarre to me. Eventually, I chalked it up to coincidence and thought, why not? I accepted the friend request, and we started our first match. Of course, Bromat0493 chose to play as the same character that Matthew would play as, and even kicked my ass just like Matthew would. Again, I assumed this was just coincidence. Now, the unique thing about this game series is that at the end of a match, the winner would kill the loser, whether it was just beating them to death or full-blown murdering them with swords, guns, etc. In our first match, Bromat0493's character burned mine alive. After the match was over, he disconnected from the server, so I logged off and called it a night. The next day, I got a call from my aunt. We hadn't spoken in years, but she said she felt that I had a right to know. My father's house had caught fire, and he died trapped inside. I attended the funeral, but even then, the rest of my family were distant to me. I even saw my mother, who was able to attend on furlough, but she looked at me, said nothing, and looked the other way. A couple of months later, I saw Bromat0493 log on. I sent him a private message asking where he had been, but he never replied. He simply initiated a match. Once again, he beat me. This time, his character impaling and then hanging mine. Once again, he disconnected from the server. The next day, I got a call from my aunt, the same as months prior. She was crying as she spoke, telling me that my mother was murdered in prison. A prisoner had stabbed her, then hung her in a cell. I dropped the phone and sat down. This couldn't be a coincidence. Both of my parents were now dead, killed in the same way as my characters would die against Bromat0493. As ridiculous as it sounded at first, I knew deep down that there was a connection. For months, I logged on every night looking for Bromat0493 to log on. I searched for his gamertag on the internet in case he had any social media accounts with the same tag. Nothing. I asked around on online forums if anyone knew anything about his gamertag. Nothing. Finally, one day, he appeared. I messaged him, demanding he tell me the truth. Was he my brother? Had he survived the accident somehow? Where had he been all these years? Why did no one know? And most importantly, why and how did he kill our parents? Suddenly, a mic icon appeared next to his name. He began to speak, and it was Matthew's voice. The same child's voice from all those years ago. He informed me that we would play one last match. If I lost, another family member would die. If I refused, I would die. But if I beat him, he would leave me alone. Our match began, and I put everything into it. I never took a video game match so seriously before in my life, not even all those years ago when I started this nightmare. It seemed hopeless, but with one sliver of my life bar remaining, I did it. I beat him. For the first time ever, I beat him. And now this nightmare would end. When it was time to deliver the killing blow, however, I did nothing. I let his character fall dead on his own, worried that by actively killing him, someone else would die in the exact same way. He logged off, and that was the last time I had ever heard from him. Years passed, and I thought the nightmare was over. But I think I was very wrong. My son is a lot older now, and so he plays much more mature video games these days, including the newest installment of that same fighting game series. This was never an issue for me, until last night. I walked in on him playing against a player named Uncle Matt 0493. To my horror, he lost, his character being brutally beaten to a bloody and unrecognizable pulp.